When we talk about the greatest chess players of all time, there is very little doubt that the competition comes down between Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. These two have been dominating the game in their respective eras, and they have made many players rub their heads in defeat. But what if these two went head-to-head in their primes? What would happen then? Well, this is a question that is impossible to answer. However, a part of it is true. If you didn't know, Carlsen and Kasparov have played each other before. That's right. It wasn't too long ago when the two of them went up against each other. In fact, the challenge was put forward by a young Magnus Carlsen to Kasparov. Let us take a background look into how this bout ended up taking place. Kasparov retired from professional chess in the year 2005. It's clear that if a game takes place between these two legends today, Carlsen would undoubtedly come out on top. As for Kasparov, he isn't entirely away from the chess world. He commentates in elite chess tournaments to make sure he keeps his memory fresh. But what about the game that took place between Carlsen and Kasparov back then? Well, the start of the game wasn't the best one for Kasparov. He arrives to the game late, and this has him losing a lot of time already. Now with the stakes already being so high and Kasparov arriving late to the game, there is added pressure on his head. However, Kasparov doesn't let this faze him. He sits down and arranges the pieces on his board, after which Carlsen makes the first move. Carlsen begins with his pawn, after which Kasparov moves a pawn of his own. After this, Carlsen moves his next pawn, and Kasparov plays the pawn in front of his queen. This move is usually known as the Slav defense, which is known to be an early defending move in chess. Kasparov moves his knight forward, and the game moves into the decline of the queen's gambit. After one of Carlsen's moves, Kasparov immediately looks uneasy as he runs his hands over his head. This indicates that he might have made a wrong move, or he might have underestimated Carlsen. Which one of the two is it? We'll get to know as the game proceeds. There are several pieces that move on the entire board between the two players. Kasparov plays in with his bishop and knight, whereas Carlsen comes in with his hard-hitting queen. It isn't an exhibition game by any means, as both competitors are going at each other. They are looking to capitalize on a single mistake by their opponent so they can take the game away from the other one's hands. It's been a grueling contest so far. Carlsen traps the pawn and queen of Kasparov's, which ends up leaving Kasparov tense. Therefore, Kasparov ends up losing one of his pawns. This is when it seems that Carlsen has gotten into Kasparov's head. But is this true or not? Let us see how the game proceeds further. Although the game is evenly tied at this point, time is running out for both players. This is when Kasparov feels like is the time to retreat his queen. That is what he does. He brings his queen back while Carlsen brings his rook into play. After several exchanges, Carlsen exposes his king. This leaves him in a pretty dangerous position because it leaves it prone to be checked by Kasparov. However, we don't expect Carlsen to be so dumb. He probably has a move or two up his sleeve which we or Kasparov don't know about. In fact, with his king exposed, Carlsen worries that Kasparov might go for a checkmate, but he notices this and pushes his pawn forward, creating some breathing space for himself. This is where things become interesting and the game heats up. The two players exchange several pieces in successive moves during this point. The two of them end up losing one of their bishops while their rooks are still there. A big blow for both players is that they've ended up losing each of their queens. With the most important piece out for both, let's see how they cope. Kasparov then attacks Carlsen's backline because he knows he is exposed at that point. Carlsen doesn't have enough pieces to save the other, and that's why he has to sacrifice many of his pieces. The two of them are entering the final moments of the game, and Carlsen is entering this part of the game with the advantage of a single pawn. This shows how evenly balanced the game is. We can't wait to see who comes out on top. Kasparov uses his rook to trap Carlsen's king and force him back. The two of them continue back and forth with several moves. Alas, the result is a draw. If anything, it shows the determination of Magnus Carlsen. Even at 13 years old, he has a draw with the #1 chess player in the world. It goes to show how Carlsen was made for greatness in this game since a very young age. Those who doubted him should go back to this game between the two and see how he managed to hold Kasparov to a draw. This is no easy feat, especially when you're just 13 years old. If anything, our hats should go off to young Magnus Carlsen. Maybe this was the day Kasparov knew that his place would be taken by Carlsen very soon. After all, trapping the #1 chess player in the world several times in a single game is no fluke. And if we look at where Carlsen is in the chess world right now, we can definitely say that this draw wasn't a fluke.